Part 6, aka the finale of Star Wars Obi-Wan Kenobi miniseries on Disney Plus. There's going to be spoilers, so just letting you know right now we're going to be diving straight into spoilers. By the way, thank you to everybody that watched parts 1 through 6 of my reviews for the Star Wars Obi-Wan Kenobi miniseries. And you can always go back and watch previous parts that you missed, as well as all 9 Star Wars episode reviews on GB Fang and Mandalorian Season 1 and 2, as well as Book of Boba Fett. For other Star Wars gaming content, check out the gaming channel. Part 6 basically picks up exactly where Part 5 left off. The Path ship with the Path survivors, Obi-Wan Kenobi, young Leia, they're aboard being pursued by Vader's Star Destroyer. For some reason, Vader doesn't launch his TIE fighters to also pursue the Path ship, even though the TIE fighters are faster than the Star Destroyer and could probably catch up and disable the Path ship. But for some reason, Vader's content with ordering his crew to continue firing turbo lasers at the Path ship. Now, the Path ship obviously has shields, and they're focusing the power of the shields to the rear deflectors to keep the ship going forward as long as they can, until they can hopefully get the motivator and the hyperdrive back up and working. And this really does have like the Last Jedi vibes to it when it came to the space chase. Fortunately, this space chase between the Path ship and Vader's Star Destroyer doesn't last as long. Meanwhile, on Tatooine, Reva shows up and she's asking about where Owen's farm is. So she somehow managed to get off the planet that Vader and the Grand Inquisitor left her on after Vader stabbed her, leaving her lightsaber. So my question is, how did she get off that planet and get past the Star Destroyer that's pursuing the Path ship and get to Tatooine? I'm guessing that these two planets are not too far from each other. I'll talk more about that later in the review. But did she get to keep her Inquisitor ship? Was that part of the package deal? Is like once they're fired from service, they get to keep their lightsaber, the uniform, the ship? I mean, I would assume that Vader or the Grand Inquisitor would have simply just killed her then and there at the end of Part 5, but alas, they did not. She's still injured, by the way, so I do want to put that out there, that Reva is still clearly injured from being stabbed by Vader. Should be a mortal wound. She should be dying, or she should have died there on the Path planet, but somehow she's on Tatooine looking for Owen's farm. Big thanks to Bail Organa for sending that message to Obi-Wan. Why he sent that message was obviously a plot device in order to get Reva to Tatooine for the other half of this episode. Meanwhile, back on the Path ship with Obi-Wan, young Leia, the rest of the Path survivors, including Roken, who is the acting leader or new leader of the Path after Tala died. He's now in charge of the ship as well that's being pursued while they're trying to get the ship repaired. He decides that the best way to give everybody aboard the ship, including young Leia, a fighting chance at surviving is to basically jump into a smaller ship, and that will force Vader to pursue Obi-Wan instead of the Path ship. Roken, young Leia, everyone else is against this because they want to protect Obi-Wan because he is a Jedi. And Obi-Wan does make a really good speech about, for the past 10 years, the Path has done their part to protect and save Jedi. Allow me to return the favor by protecting all of you. So against protests by Roken and young Leia, Obi-Wan takes their launch ship and goes out to this planet that's nearby. Vader sees this, orders the Star Destroyer to open fire and pursue on the smaller launch ship, which doesn't look that much smaller than the Path ship whenever it comes out. It's very large, and you think it would be a smaller vessel, but I think it's kind of weird how they did it in the CGI department. But anyways, Obi-Wan was correct. Vader has chosen to pursue this launch ship that Obi-Wan is aboard instead of the Path ship. The Grand Inquisitor, who's right beside Vader, is not happy about this. He's like, my lord, we should go after the Path ship instead because we have an opportunity to take down their entire network. And Vader's like, no, Obi-Wan's more important. We have to take him out. So my question here is, you have an Imperial Star Destroyer under the command of Lord Vader that should have a squadron of TIE fighters. And it also has a Lambda-class shuttle because Vader does use his Lambda-class shuttle to go down to this planet as well in order to confront Obi-Wan. Couldn't Grand Inquisitor and Vader both got what they want in this situation? Vader gets into his Lambda-class shuttle, goes after Obi-Wan, orders the Grand Inquisitor to continue the pursuit in his Star Destroyer after the PAF ship. But no, that's not how it plays out. The entire Star Destroyer decides to go after Obi-Wan instead, which does allow the PAF ship to escape. Meanwhile, back on Tatooine, Owen has a conversation with somebody who warns him that Reva is looking for him and Luke. So Owen goes back to the farm with young Luke, has a conversation with Beru. They prepare to confront Reva at nightfall, so they have weapons, guns, obviously. They arm themselves. They tell Luke that there's Tusken Raiders attacking farms, kind of as the excuse to tell Luke to hide. Because at the time, Luke is 10 years old, just like Leia is, because, spoiler alert, they're twins. So Luke is hiding in a safe space somewhere on the Owen Lars farm. Owen and Beru are armed with, I guess, Tusken-style rifles, preparing for Reva's arrival at night. So if Reva has a ship that she used to get from the Path planet past the Imperial Star Destroyer pursuing the Path ship to Tatooine, why is she walking to the Owen Lars farm? Why doesn't she use the same ship to fly to Owen Lars farm instead? Meanwhile, on an unnamed planet, Obi-Wan has landed his launch ship and has Lola with him. For some reason, he took Lola, younger Leia's little flying droid. It's never properly explained why he took Lola, or else I must have missed that part. He's waiting for Vader to show up, and Vader, of course, arrives not too long afterwards, landing in his Lambda-class shuttle. He gets out of the shuttle, and there's like a distance between Obi-Wan and Vader, and this is the quote-unquote rematch of the century. Bear in mind, both these scenes, the one on Tatooine where Reva is heading towards Owen Lars farm, and the rematch of the century between Obi-Wan and Vader on two separate planets, are happening around the same time. Meanwhile, on Tatooine, it's nightfall. Reva has arrived. Owen and Beru have opened fire on Reva, and despite the fact that Reva is badly injured from being stabbed by Vader not too long ago, she still manages to come out of the fight unscathed. She ends up beating the crap out of Owen, and they tell Luke to run, so Luke ends up fleeing off into the desert in the middle of the night with Reva pursuing. She eventually knocks Luke out with the Force, and nearly kills Luke with her lightsaber. But she has flashbacks of the Purge, Order 66, back at the Jedi Temple when she was a youngling, and her fellow younglings and herself were stabbed by Vader. Basically, Reva has come to realize, after 10 years, that she's become no better than Darth Vader. As far as I can tell, I don't think that young Luke saw Reva's lightsaber. He was too busy fleeing from the farm into the desert. So when he was knocked unconscious, it obviously was a convenience so that Luke has no idea why he was knocked unconscious, except for he was being pursued by, as far as he knows, Tusken Raiders. In other words, Luke never saw a lightsaber, which I guess that part of the canon has not been violated. So kudos to the writers for part 6 of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Back on the unknown planet where Vader and Obi-Wan are having the rematch of the century, they're both very strong in the Force. They both start fighting, and Obi-Wan does renew a line from episode 3, I will do what I must, and he does his Jedi pose, and then Vader says, then you will die. So they have this fight, which is better than the fight they had at the mining planet a few episodes prior, which was barely even a fight. It's choreographed better than the fight between Reva and Vader, which also really wasn't much of a fight either. It was a very one-sided fight where Vader was easily more than a match for Reva. But in this match, you have, in a short period of time, Obi-Wan going from being very cowardly not able to use the Force or lightsaber anymore back on the mining planet, to having a montage, I guess. Now he can use his lightsaber again at full strength, as well as the Force powers. And Vader, I think he's still a little bit more powerful in the Force, using the dark side and his hatred and anger towards Obi-Wan. He basically uses the Force to break open the ground and create a hole underneath Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan falls into the hole, and then Vader starts trying to bury Obi-Wan with rocks and dirt and tells Obi-Wan that you have failed, my master. And then Vader walks away thinking that he has successfully buried and killed Obi-Wan. Obviously, Vader is wrong. Obi-Wan is using the Force to hold back these rocks, and he starts having flashbacks about young Luke and young Leia, which give him motivation and reason to fight. So he pushes the rocks and the dirt out of the way. He has this weird jump up the rock. It looks very weird. And then, without Vader realizing it, all of a sudden Obi-Wan is back in the fight, and the fight becomes very, very one-sided. Obi-Wan basically kicks the crap out of Vader. He force pushes Vader up against a rock. He lifts up some other rocks and starts throwing a whole bunch of rocks at Vader. And then he gets a couple lightsaber hits on Vader, screwing it up pretty bad, causes the wincing, the heavy breathing that Vader has at the end of Return of the Jedi. Vader is getting more badly damaged, going up against Obi-Wan, and then Obi-Wan smacks Vader in the face and his mask. It breaks off half the mask, revealing the damaged Anakin underneath Vader's mask. Very similar to what Ahsoka did to Vader in Star Wars Rebels. And then you have a pretty emotional scene between Obi-Wan and Vader. Credit to everyone involved. Ewan McGregor, along with Hayden Christensen, and James Earl Jones, because you hear James Earl Jones's voice at the same time as Hayden's voice. I like the way they did that. It worked rather well, in my opinion. So they're having this conversation, and basically Vader tells Kenobi that you didn't kill Anakin, I did. And Obi-Wan then, of course, says, then my friend is truly dead, which is obviously a similar line that Luke says to Vader in Return of the Jedi. Then my father is truly dead. So at this point, Obi-Wan, who is emotional about, seeing what Anakin looks like underneath the mask, what was done to Anakin, he partially blames himself, but also comes to realize from Vader's own words that it was Vader who made the choice to, quote unquote, kill Anakin and become Darth Vader. And before Obi-Wan walks away, he says, goodbye, Darth. Turns off his lightsaber, walks back to his ship with a damaged, weakened, badly breathing, wincing Vader, screaming Obi-Wan over and over again. He may have screamed Kenobi a few times as well, but obviously Darth Vader has lost the fight against Obi-Wan. So I guess they're 1 and 2 now, because technically Vader won that mining planet fight, and that means they have one fight left on the Death Star. So I guess it's a tie ball game, right? So they end up 2 and 2, right? Now, the rematch of the century was okay. I think it could have gone on a little bit longer. I think that if they added a few more minutes to the fight, it might have made it better. For a little bit, like taunting between the rocks, Vader taunting him, Obi-Wan taunting him. They should have added a bit more in this scene, but it was okay for a quote-unquote rematch of the century. Definitely better than the so-called mining fight that they had previously, but was it as good as their fight on Mustafar at the end of episode 3? No. Was it better than their Death Star fight in episode 4? Kind of, sort of, because these two are more powerful. Obi-Wan, I guess a decade later, becomes a lot weaker in the Force. He's in his final days. And obviously the actor Alec McGuinness wasn't exactly a young lad whenever he was cast in the role of A New Hope when he played Obi-Wan Kenobi, a.k.a. Ben Kenobi. And so the choreography between Obi-Wan and Vader on the Death Star wasn't the best. There is a really cool fan-made fight between older Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader on the Death Star. I think it came out a few years ago, but I like that fight scene much better than what we got in A New Hope for a fight scene between Vader and Obi-Wan. But it just feels like Vader's kind of toying and playing with Obi-Wan. In that fight, he realizes that your powers are weak, old man. But obviously, in that scene, Obi-Wan did not intend to win the fight against Vader. He was simply buying Luke, Leia, Han, Chewie, C-3PO, and R2-D2 time to escape the Death Star. Once Obi-Wan gets back in the launch ship and off this unknown planet, somehow he gets past Darth Vader's Imperial Star Destroyer, squadrons of TIE fighters that never got launched to secure the planet or patrol around the planet, in case Obi-Wan was to succeed and somehow escape. Obi-Wan's able to jump in the light speed because he senses something's wrong with Luke on Tatooine, and he arrives as Owen and Beru are, walking around outside the farm, screaming in the night, looking for Luke. And all of a sudden, Reva walks up out of the desert, carrying unconscious Luke, and she basically gives Luke back to Owen and Beru. And then she has a conversation with Obi-Wan, and she's basically like, I'm no better than Darth Vader, am I? And then Obi-Wan, consoles her, tells her that you have the ability to change, that you don't have to be like Darth Vader, that you can be better than him. Not the best redemption arc, but I guess they could have done worse. So Reva is no longer third sister. She's no longer an Inquisitor. She even puts her lightsaber on the ground, and I'm guessing she doesn't take it with her, so she's leaving behind the dark side and her former position as third sister, even though you think that Vader and Grand Inquisitor should have terminated her employment in a different way, but alas, they allowed her to live for reasons. What becomes of Reva after this scene with her and Obi-Wan? Who knows? There's rumors that there might be a Reva spinoff series on Disney+. There's also rumors that there might be a second season to Obi-Wan Kenobi, which could also feature Obi-Wan and Reva, maybe going out into the galaxy, helping the fledgling Rebel Alliance. I don't know if I like that idea too much, but there are rumors out there about either a second season of Obi-Wan Kenobi, even though this was supposed to be a miniseries, and also a potential Reva series as well on Disney+. But there's so many Star Wars series in the works for Disney+. It really wouldn't surprise me if they have something planned for Reva. Meanwhile, back on Mustafar, I guess Vader's had a chance to chill in the Bacta tank, get a new drip, get his suit repaired. He's sitting on his throne having a conversation with the Emperor. So we get an Ian McDiarmid cameo, which is kind of cool through the hologram. Basically, Vader's like, we sent out probes and we still haven't been able to find Kenobi, but I will find Kenobi, my lord. I promise you that. And then the Emperor's kind of questioning Vader, like, are you actually loyal to me? Are you still loyal to Obi-Wan? What's going on here? And then, of course, Vader's like, no, I am absolutely 100% loyal to you, my master. And then we get the Darth Vader theme. Finally, we finally got the Darth Vader theme. Thank you very much. After, 6 parts, we finally get that. So we do get a final pan with Darth Vader's theme while sitting on his throne inside Vader's castle on Mustafar. So I like that they finally incorporated some John Williams music into the Obi-Wan Kenobi miniseries. They just waited till part 6 to pepper it in here and there. A little bit of Luke's theme, I think. A little bit of Leia's theme as well. And speaking of Leia, Obi-Wan ends up taking the launch ship and swings by Alderaan to give Lola back to Leia, along with this holster. I think he actually gave the holster to Leia back on the PAV ship. I think it was Tala's holster, and he wanted Leia to have it, I guess. So Leia now has it, and she puts Lola in the holster, and Belle and Belle's wife are hanging out. They have a conversation with Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan is like, if you ever need my help, don't hesitate to ask. And then Belle is like, I hope I never have to ask. Of course, about a decade later, they do end up having to ask for Obi-Wan's help, which is the beginning of A New Hope. Before Obi-Wan leaves, he has a conversation with young Leia and tells her that she has traits that remind him of both her biological mother as well as her biological father. Despite the fact that Obi-Wan doesn't tell young Leia who her biological mother and father are, he does, tell her that you have these positive traits that come from your mom and these positive traits that come from your dad. So that was a very touching final scene between Obi-Wan Kenobi and young Leia. And I know some people had a problem with young Leia. I thought that the actress did an okay job. Bear in mind, this is a 10-year-old girl. I don't know how young the actress is. Maybe she's a little older than 10 years old. But I think for what we got out of young Leia, I thought she was okay. I mean, I think there were some scenes that were kind of cringy that really didn't work or make sense. But I think the actress herself did okay as a young Leia. Now, when it comes to what many of us would consider a plot hole in New Hope, where it seems like Leia doesn't really know about Obi-Wan Kenobi, that her mission was to go find General Kenobi, that could have just been seen as two things: her being diplomatic and professional. Plus, bear in mind, at the beginning of A New Hope, you have the Tantive 4 being pursued by Darth Vader's Imperial Star Destroyer. And I think the original mission was for Leia to actually go down there, talk to Obi-Wan, and convince him to come and help the Rebel Alliance against the Empire. The fact that the Empire found Tantive 4 and had almost captured her along with the ship, she was kind of in a rush, so she had to make a very short and sweet and precise message to put into R2 in order to get him down to the planet as quick as possible in the hopes of getting R2 to Obi-Wan Kenobi. So obviously you could make the argument that she simply didn't have time to reminisce in her message to Obi-Wan about their past adventures a decade prior. So I'm willing to forgive that. And if you also incorporate how excited she is to hear about Ben Kenobi when Luke shows up to the Death Star saying, "Hey, I'm here with Ben Kenobi. I'm here to rescue you." And she's like, "Ben Kenobi?" Then obviously she knows that Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ben Kenobi are the same person. So now that this miniseries has concluded, I no longer really feel like that bit of information is a plot hole. Obi-Wan returns to Tatooine, to the Owen Lars farm. He has a conversation with Owen. He tells Owen that Luke's future is not in his control or Owen's control. It's whatever the Force decides. And they seem to part on friendly terms. And basically, Obi-Wan says that I trust you to protect Luke. You don't need me. But if the time ever comes when Luke does need me, I'll be there. And then before Obi-Wan leaves, by the way, he has his horse or camel back. I don't know who was taking care of his space camel while he was away, but obviously somebody did. Before he gets back on his space camel, Owen says, "Hey, would you like to meet young Luke?" And of course, Obi-Wan has Luke's little fighter, and he walks up to Luke and he says, "Hello there." And that was a cool scene. I gotta admit, that was a pretty cool scene. So that's how Obi-Wan officially introduces himself to Luke. And of course, he probably introduced himself as Ben Kenobi, not Obi-Wan Kenobi, because that's what Owen refers to Ben Kenobi as years later. Then the final scene in the desert with Obi-Wan on his space camel going into the Dune Sea. I'm guessing he's heading towards his space hut that he's eventually going to build, or the location where he'll build his space hut. He has a vision of Qui-Gon Jinn, cameo by Liam Neeson. So we got some cameos. We got Ian McDiarmid, we got Liam Neeson. But I do kind of sort of have an issue with this scene, even though I like the idea of Liam Neeson's voice returning as Qui-Gon Jinn. He never became truly one with the Force the same way that Ben Kenobi or Obi-Wan Kenobi or Yoda did. Most of the time, it was only his voice that others would hear. So I think that this scene could have actually worked better and probably even easier for Liam Neeson if they simply just put him into like a voice studio and just recorded some audio, and just while like Obi-Wan is like having a meditation, then over the wind he starts to hear Qui-Gon and his voice communicating with him. And then maybe having the Star Wars music or like Luke's music in the background. I don't know. I think that would have been a cooler scene. The brief scene between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan is okay. But I think in this situation, less is more would have been a lot more impactful. I think it would have worked better. And it would have made more sense, especially for people that are familiar with the Clone Wars era of Star Wars. He's just more of a Force voice, but he still exists within the nexus of the Force itself. Overall, I do think this is probably the best episode of all 6 parts, so clearly they saved the best for last. I don't think that this miniseries had to be a miniseries. I think at the best, There's a lot of filler stuff that could have been chopped out. It could have been concise down into a Disney Plus movie. Or better yet, since we have more movies appearing in theaters once again, like for example, Top Gun recently, the sequel, Top Gun Maverick, doing quite well in theaters. I did a review about it a week ago. Awesome movie. This would have been a good opportunity for Disney to put Obi-Wan Kenobi as a movie in the theaters. It probably would have done rather well if it was edited down a bit. Some of the action scenes reshot, because I like Deborah Chow as a director for the most part, but some of her action scenes, especially the bigger ones, the battles between stormtroopers and the path of soldiers, fighters, weren't so good. But yeah, I think that Obi-Wan Kenobi movie would have probably worked way better than an Obi-Wan miniseries. There's obviously character choices that could have been tweaked or rewritten or improved a bit. Like, for example, Reva's story arc, I think it could have been handled better. I think they made her too aggressive, too dark side. She did quite a few nasty things from parts 1 through 5 in order to get this redemption in part 6. Maybe she shouldn't have chopped off some random person's hand on Tatooine, or hire kidnappers to go after a 10-year-old girl, threaten to torture and kill a 10-year-old girl, and everything else she did prior to the events of Obi-Wan Kenobi throughout her decade career as a Sith Inquisitor. Do I think she's just as bad as Darth Vader? Absolutely not, because he's done way worse over the past decade than she ever could. She tried, but yeah, she's nowhere near the same level of evil or as a dark side user as Darth Vader. I just think that they could have handled her character a little bit better. There were twists that a lot of us saw coming from a parsec away. The Grand Inquisitor being allegedly killed, that didn't make sense because he's supposed to be more powerful than Third Sister, and he obviously is in Rebels, so he couldn't have been killed. There was no real concern about the fates of Obi-Wan, Luke, Leia, Bail Organa, his wife, Darth Vader, Owen, Beru, Lars, because these characters have to remain alive until when they die in future Star Wars movies. All too often throughout this miniseries, Obi-Wan and the Path were basically allowed to escape from the mining planet, where only a fire and a loading droid stopped Darth Vader and his stormtroopers from catching and taking Obi-Wan into custody, to Darth Vader not using TIE fighters or TIE bombers. I believe TIE bombers exist within this time period as well, to, I guess, surround the Path base on Jabeam, bomb the base on Jabeam, and use squadrons of TIE fighters along with Darth Vader's Star Destroyer in pursuit of disabling or destroying the Path ship, leaving Reva alive, Reva finding some sort of way off of Jabeam. She obviously didn't use that other Path ship that Vader ripped apart after he slammed it back to the ground. And I seriously doubt the Empire allowed Reva to keep her Sith ship after Darth Vader and the Grand Inquisitor left her stabbed with her lightsaber laying on the ground. Like I said earlier, maybe they did. I mean, at the very least, there should have been some other smaller vessel hidden in the Path cave that Reva just happened to stumble into to take off from. But we go from her being laid on the ground, stabbed, looking at that broken holocron of Bel's message, to her somehow being on Tatooine in a short period of time. Obviously, Jabeam and Tatooine can't be that far away, because even at hyperspace, it does take a long while to get from the outer rim to the inner core, or somewhere in the middle. There were definitely moments in the Obi-Wan Kenobi miniseries that I liked. There were plenty that I obviously had issue with throughout part 1 through 6 of my reviews. But overall, I think that at best, this would have been better as a movie that was put in theaters for a limited amount of time and then put over on Disney Plus, or just simply scrapped altogether, because it adds no value, no benefit to the Star Wars franchise as a whole. In fact, it nearly ran the risk of causing some serious damage to the original trilogy, which they mostly patched up in parts 5 and 6, more or less. Like I mentioned at the end of part 5, the big reason why Disney Plus did this is money. They did it because it increased subscriber sales to Disney Plus. Pure and simple. It was about them putting more content on Disney Plus, all these other Star Wars shows, MCU shows, even if most of them are cheap and trash and awful and suck, doesn't matter. They're going to go as cheap as they can. They're going to put as much content as possible on Disney Plus in order to try and get as many people as possible to subscribe to Disney Plus for Disney Star Wars and the MCU. I don't just blame Kathleen Kennedy, by the way. I blame the head honchos of Disney as well for the Obi-Wan Kenobi miniseries, which could have been done better if they would have rearranged the script a bit to make it a movie instead of a miniseries. Despite Ewan McGregor's interest in a season 2 for Obi-Wan Kenobi, his willingness to come back, I just don't see how a season 2 of Obi-Wan Kenobi can benefit the Star Wars franchise as a whole. And when it comes to a Reva series, if that happens, it happens. But that's pretty much my thoughts, my views, and opinion regarding not just Part 6, but the finale and the series as a whole. Well, the miniseries of Star Wars Obi-Wan Kenobi. With that being said, I want to know your thoughts, your views, your opinions, what you liked and did not like about the miniseries of Obi-Wan Kenobi as a whole. Are you interested in a spin-off Reva series or a season 2 of Obi-Wan Kenobi? Feel free and let me know below in the comments section, and may the Force be with you.